Happy Tuesday, mathematicians. Today is our first day of second quarter, and we're starting a new unit on division. Today for Math Workshop, you're going to need your math notebook, your Envisions workbook, which is the thin workbook with black and white pages. You're going to be ripping out page 57 and 58, and your blue math resource folder that's located in your anchor binder. Go ahead and open up your blue folder, and on the left-hand side, you're going to undo the clip. Most of the pages are in the correct order, but you need to make sure that you're listening carefully so you always pull out the correct ones. The first one you're going to be pulling out says 5-1, and in the teach box it starts with, when you divide, you find the number of equal groups. The second page you're going to need today says 4.4, divide tens, hundreds, and thousands. The rest of the pages keep in your blue folder, put your clip back on, and then go ahead and close to make sure it stays in your anchor binder. Now we're going to go back to our math notebook, and as we said, we're starting a new unit today on division. So we have finished up the 2 chapters on multiplication. Now we're using the same fact families and using the inverse operation, which is to divide. So we're going to start by looking at our page number 1661. So we're going to add 62 and 63. Once you're done adding the page numbers, go ahead and turn back to your table of contents. So last week, Mrs. Lang ended on page 60, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my page, and I'm going to start by adding number 62, and we're starting the next unit, which is on division. And this lesson is called Find Quotients. Then you're going to put today's date, which is 10-13-20. Make sure that even if you are a student going back to brick and mortar, so going back to the classroom, that you are listening to the lesson video, you're completing your work, because the brick and mortar teachers and classrooms are on the same lesson, and you don't want to get yourself off by not learning the lesson that you're going to need. Go ahead now, turn back to page 62, and we're going to glue in our teach pages. So the teach pages that we pulled out, we're going to place the one that says 5.1 on the left, and the one that had said 4.4 on the right-hand side. And the numbers don't really mean anything to you. It's just which textbook company created the lesson. And as 4th grade teachers, we have made teach pages that go along with the content. So sometimes they come from different years. So turn this page over, smooth it out, and that's your left side. On the right, go ahead and do the same work. There we go. And smooth it out. And just like we've always done, if your page numbers have been covered up, go ahead and just make sure that it's rewritten on top so you can keep yourself nice and organized. There we go. All right, and at the top, we're gonna highlight the title on the right. So divide tens, hundreds, and thousands. And then on the left-hand side, we're going to write our title for today, which is Division, Find Quotients. And then we're going to use the same color highlighter, and just as we usually do, we highlight the box around the title to remind ourselves what is the intention for our lesson today. So just like with multiplication, the first lesson in each of those units, we started by using our zeros trick and used our fact families and groupings of 10 to help us solve. We're going to use the same concept today, but using it for division. So before we get to the left side, we're going to just start at the right page, and we're going to fill in some of the closed notes. So at the top of the right page, it says because, and the first word we're going to fill in is the word division. Because division is the opposite, we're going to box the word opposite, of multiplication, we can use our multiplication songs, and fact families to quickly find quotients. So this is the key word right here, the new vocabulary that means the answers to division. So make sure that you're really looking at what that word quotient means. To many questions involving zeros. So we're going to be using that zeros trick in reverse today. So we're going to go ahead now and use that same understanding of the word quotients, which means answers to division, and we're going to start now on the left side. On the left in the teach box, it says when you divide, so let's highlight the operation we're going to be focusing on this topic. You find the number of equal parts, equal groups, or the number of items in each group. So that's what we're highlighting with that different color. So why do we use division? Well, they just told us we're finding equal groups or the number of items within the group. So for example, they've given us the equation of 28 items divided into 4 groups is how many in a group. So the first thing we have to know is what are all of these numbers representing and what are the names of their placement. So the first one we're going to label is the first number being used. This is called a dividend. So go ahead and write that vocabulary, dividend. The second number, which is what it says dividing by, this is called our divisor. So the dividend is the amount of an item divided by the divisor. We often refer to the divisor as how many groups we're making. When we then have an answer, we said that the answer to a division problem is called the quotient. So we're going to put answer, which is the number of items in a group. So it's very important to know the vocabulary of what each of those numbers are referred to in their placement, because oftentimes questions will use the vocabulary only and you need to know how to identify that particular answer. So for this one, it says there are blank items in all. That is referring to our dividend. So when we looked back at our dividend, we could see that there are 28 items in all. So in all refers to that placement. The second, the second sentence says the items are divided into 4 equal groups. So 4 is our divisor, and we said that the divisor always refers to how many groups we're using. The final one says there are blank items in each group. So when we see each group, that refers to the quotient or the answer. So then we know that the answer was 7. So they showed you a quick bar model to say that the number at the top represents the entire amount. There are 4 separate boxes, so that's the 4 groups. And in each of those groups, we had 7 items in a group. So the picture shows the division problem set up. This is also our fact family of 4 times 7 would give us the product of 28. It's just showing it in reverse. The next part says you can use mental math to help divide greater numbers. You can use basic division facts and patterns to help you divide mentally. So when we look at this, we have to remember that we're using our basic division facts and patterns. So these are fact families and zeros trick. So we're going to just put in parentheses fact families and zeros trick. So it has the same idea and the same process. So the first one, it says Casper copied 320 pages. So we know that this is going to be an important number with a label. He divides the pages equally is a key word, into 8 packets. So right there, it already tells me another important number, and it tells me which one based on the keyword equally. So the 8 packets is referring to the divisor. because it says how many groups. How many pages are in each packet? So the question tells us that important word of each, which means that we need to find, so find the quotient. And we should remember that quotient is the answer. So if we know that we have the divisor already identified, 8 packets, so 8 groups of a certain amount, the first number refers to our dividend. So go ahead and make sure you're labeling, because we know that this is the total amount to begin with. We're going to equally divvy them out into 8 groups, and we have to figure out how many are in each of those groups. So when we look at the problem, it says to find 320 divided by 8. The basic division fact without the 0 is 32 divided by 8. So we could say, well, 32 divided by 8, I can think of it in reverse to say 8 times what missing number gives me the product of 32. So when we look at that, we can then say, well, I know 8 times 4 is 32, which means if it's the basic fact, I'm still using the same 3 numbers. I need to fill it in appropriately. We're going to then go down to the next step to say, well, 32 tens, I'm going to box that word because this is our renaming information, divided by 8. Well, 32 divided by 8 we said was 4. Well, 4 tens, the word tens gets transferred over, and 4 tens is the same thing as saying 40. So we can say the original problem of 320 divided by 8, use the zeros trick. 32 divided by 8 is 4. Our answer is 40. There will be 40 pages in each packet. When we look at this quick picture, we can then see that the top number is the total pages for the entire thing. It told us 8 packets, so there are 8 squares. And then we had to determine how much is that variable, the letter P, worth. So we would have 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4. And if we added those all back together, we then would be able to tell that that is our number. And that would be 40 when we did our zeros trick back with it. The next problem we have is find 4,500 divided by 9. So we're going to use the same kind of stretched out steps, and then we'll show how we use the zeros trick. So 4,500 divided by 9, the basic division fact is, so we take off the zeros to say, well, that's 45 divided by 9. If I think my basic fact in reverse, 9 times what missing number gives me the number 45. If I sing my 9 song, I would say 9, 18, 27, 36, and 45. So I said it 5 times. So the missing number for this basic fact is 5. When I then plug it back in with the renaming, the first number, 45, is still there, but we say the original was 4,500s. So the place value is still marked. Divided by 9 is still the number 5. Move the place value over to the quotient. So 500s is the same thing as written out as 500. We then can go back to the original problem of 4,500, take the 2 zeros, put them back in the quotient. 45 divided by 9 is 5 to place in front to be the quotient of 500. Looking at the next one, it says use patterns to find 5,600 divided by 7. So if we look back at the basic fact, 56 divided by 7, I can do the same thing with my basic fact. 7 times a missing number to give me 56. And then you could do the same thing, the 7, 14, 21, 28, and then you keep going until you get up to 56, which you should have been able to sing it 8 times, which shows you the missing number for this division fact family. We then can place it back where we had it. So the original number was 560 divided by 7 is 80, because we had to figure out how this worked with the 1 0, because if we use the basic fact and zeros trick, the 0 would have been coming out to the side. And then that means if now there's 2 zeros, we can take the 2 zeros off, put them in the quotient, and still have the 56 divided by 7, and that will give us 800. Going to number 5, still with the same type of pattern, using different amounts and finding the missing blanks. So 48 divided by 6, we can say 6 times what missing number gives me 48. You could sing your 6 song. You would be able to skip count 6 8 times to get to the number 48, which means the missing quotient for the original pattern is 8. Then we move down to say, okay, well, if I know my quotient is 80, I could then put it back over to the dividend and then use my pattern of knowing what goes in front of that 0. So 480 divided by 6 is the quotient 80. Now looking at the original problem, we're going in reverse. Take the 2 zeros, place them in the quotient. 48 divided by 6 gets the 8 to be an 800. The last portion on this page, it says use basic facts, patterns, or mental math to find each quotient. So if you're using basic facts and zeros trick, you're going to be able to solve this quickly. The first one says 9,000 divided by 3. Take the 3 zeros, place them in the quotient. You're left with the basic fact 9 divided by 3, which should give you 3, because you could say or skip count by the divisor. The next one, 640 divided by 8. Take the 0, place it in the quotient. Now you have your basic fact of 64 divided by 8. Remember that the divisor is what you're skip counting by, so you could skip count by 8s now. You should be able to say 8 times to get to the number 64, which give you a quotient of 80. This one is a tricky one because you have 2,000 divided by 5. If you only look at zeros trick, you would say, well, I have 3 zeros, I can put them right away in the quotient. But then you're left with the number 2 divided by 5. 2 divided by 5 would not work because you have to think of your basic facts. So 5 times what number would give me the number that is originally my dividend? But there is no number that we can multiply 5 by to get to the product of 2. So that means that we have to pull one of those zeros to be part of the basic fact. Now we can say 5 times 4 gives me 20. So if I go back and I look again, I only need to use the zeros trick for 2 of those zeros. So take those 2 zeros, place them in the quotient. That way it leaves me with the number 20. 20 divided by 5 gives me that 4 that was missing to say 400. We're not going to be doing the on the back, so you can go ahead and put a line through that number 9 problem. Now jumping over to the right side, we're going to look at some of the remaining practice problems. So in the example portion, you're given the original problem of if 3 times 400 is the product of 1,200, put your comma to show the correct place value, then 1,200, this symbol right here, this is another way to say division. So we're going to write symbol for division. And this is something you will often see in a test. It's just another symbol to mean the same thing. So 1,200 divided by 3 equals 400. So we can see that this model has shown 3 groups, that's the 3 circles, times 400. So each of these are those hundreds flats. And if we counted up how many there should be 1,200 altogether when you count up all of them. The next problem, it says if 6 groups times 600 in each is equivalent to 3,600, then 3,600, remember that's division again, divided by 6 equals 600 in a group. So remember that you're still looking at the same information. So we had 6 groups that had 600 in each. So we could have skip counted by 600 to get to that total of 3,600. One other way to show a different division symbol, so we said that there is this slash mark That is a backward slash that shows a division symbol. We have the typical division symbol, meaning there is a dot with a line like a bar and a dot underneath. Another way to mean division is the dividend is at the top. Underneath would be the divisor, and that would be equivalent to the quotient. So this symbol right here is also another symbol for division, and we'll talk about this more when we get to our fractions chapter. The next problem we're going to look at is once again drawing a quick picture to represent a basic fact. So the first one, it says if 4 groups of 200 is equivalent to 800, so the first thing we're going to do is draw 4 groups because that's the original factor of 200. So if I say this has 200, this has 200, this has 200, and this has 200, well, we know that the total should be 800. Now we have to write in a division problem. So the total number, which means everything combined, we call the product, but it also then changes to be called the dividend, so how much we have to begin with. We then divide by how many groups we created. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. So that's our divisor, which is equivalent to how much is in a group. So what is the amount in a group? Well, we only ever count for the quotient what's in one group. So we said that that is a 200. The next problem we're going to do is we're only given it in division. Now we have to move it back to multiplication. So we said if the dividend is 5,600, that is also considered to be the product. The dividing by the amount of groups, this is going to be the amount of groups. So this is this is going to be the next number. So times the groups. So when we know it's divided into 8 groups, so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because divided by 8, that's always divided by the groups, is 700. 700 means that there's 700 in each of those 8 groups. So we're going to go ahead and fill this in. And then we're going to also be able to then say, well, this amount inside is going to be the original number. So 700 times 8 groups of it is 5,600. Now today for your classwork, to finish first before you do your workbook page, you're going to try the section that says now you try. So we're going to do the first one together, and then you're going to finish up the remaining 7. So the first part is you're given a division problem for this first one. It says 5,400 divided by 9. So I'm going to say use the zeros trick, place those in the quotient. I'm left with my basic fact of 54 divided by 9, which gives me 6, which is a 600. The word because means that you're showing the opposite. So what does it look like for multiplication? So I'm going to use my numbers to say, well, the groups of 9 I can then place down. 600 is going to be my other missing factor, and 600 times 9 should give me the original, which we said was the dividend. So the 3 numbers that you're using in the division problem are the same 3 numbers you're using in multiplication, but you have to remember the correct order. So your dividend is always going to be the product in the end. So once you're done with these 7 problems, you're going to pull out the page from your classwork, the workbook page. We said that was page 57 and 58. You're going to be completing all the even numbers. So numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Then on the reverse side, number 22, number 24, and number 26. So today you have 3 pages to show me. Once you've completed